todos e a todas, e meus cumprimentos especiais ao IAT, aqui cumprimentando a Patrícia, ao programa de pós-graduação em educação, na presença da Lívia, a Faculdade de Educação, na presença do Júlio, e a Pró-Reitoria de Graduação, na presença da Maria e do Bruno. Muito bem. O Michael Apple, na verdade, já está aí, a Patrícia já destacou algumas das suas contribuições, e é claro que ele dispensa apresentações pela grande repercussão dos seus trabalhos aqui no Brasil, né? Principalmente nas teses e nas dissertações de mestrado e doutorado. Vocês viram aí que o Michael é professor emérito, né, da Escola de Educação da Universidade de Wisconsin-Madison, onde trabalhou desde 1970 a 2018, uma longa carreira. Não é? Mas antes disso, Michael Apple foi professor primário e secundário e atuou no sindicato, como a Patrícia já mencionou, na cidade onde cresceu, em Nova Jersey. Ele fez o doutorado no renomado Teachers College da Universidade de Columbia. Michael, para mim, principalmente, se tornou muito conhecido no movimento de reconceitualização do currículo que ocorreu nos Estados Unidos no início da década de 70. Esse movimento questionava a visão desinteressada da transmissão do conhecimento escolar e criticava a ênfase que era dada, na época, à questão do planejamento e da implementação do currículo. Esse movimento, liderado por figuras como Apple, busca mostrar as relações entre currículo e estrutura social, currículo e cultura, poder, ideologia e controle social. Em seus primeiros livros, Ideologia e Currículo, Educação e Poder e Trabalho Docente e Textos, Apple busca mostrar, entre outras coisas, como o conhecimento escolar recria a hegemonia ideológica dos grupos e classes dominantes, como o papel também mostra como o papel da cultura na forma como as escolas contribuem para reproduzir e mudar configurações sociais. Trabalha com a relação entre Estado, escola e currículo. E discute a resistência e oposições que permeiam a prática curricular. Também já aponta a influência de raça e gênero, além de classe social, nos elementos de discriminação ou de libertação presente nas escolas, no currículo e sala de aula. Ele já procura superar a visão mais economicista da educação e enfatiza a crença de que gênero e raça não podem ter suas relações reduzidas à classe social. Por exemplo, no seu livro Trabalho Docente e Textos, Michael mostra como o gênero é uma figura importante para se compreender o processo educacional. Volta-se particularmente para o trabalho feminino, a exploração do trabalho da mulher, e tenta mostrar que a história do magistério primário é a história de uma força de trabalho constituída predominantemente por mulheres. Para mim, né, eu vou levantar assim, duas coisas que me impactaram muito, né, do trabalho do Michael Apple. No livro dele, reprodução cultural e econômica em educação, ele discute que não é só o conteúdo, mas a forma como os pacotes curriculares trabalham, que terminam contribuindo para a formação do indivíduo possessivo. Ou seja, ele, de certa forma, é um trabalho que mostra como esse formato, né, de instrução mais individualizada, ele termina formando, ajudando a formar o individualismo, que é tão importante, um fator tão importante para o desenvolvimento do capitalismo. E outra coisa que, para mim, assim, outro artigo que me chamou muita atenção do Michael é um artigo em que ele trabalha, um texto em que ele trabalha a formação da nova direita. Eu acho que foi muito importante esse texto no Brasil, porque já havia, né, já tinha emergido nos Estados Unidos essa nova direita, que era constituída pelos neoliberais, os neoconservadores, os populistas autoritários e a nova classe média profissional. Mas esse texto voltou a ser muito citado quando o mesmo fenômeno aconteceu no Brasil, anos mais tarde. Então, esse texto teve uma grande repercussão, não no momento que foi lançado, mas maior ainda, posteriormente, quando nós estávamos discutindo as relações, né, o que a nova direita estava fazendo, estava produzindo no campo educacional. Então, eu queria agora chamar o professor Michael Apple para vir à mesa para a sua conferência.
Boa tarde. Unfortunately, that is all of the Portuguese I know, though I do know a few other words that I'm not allowed to say in public. I want to thank Patricia and Lucila for giving my lecture for me. I don't mean that as a joke. That is, the key issues are exactly those. Those of you who know me know that with a last name like Apple, having been a former teacher, well, I'm still a teacher, but working in kindergartens, teaching calculus, teaching women's gymnastics, I was getting a call every day to go from class to class because I did not have a proper license to be a teacher. The Army had trained me as a teacher, and as some of you have heard before, in my own city, which was a very segregated, racist city, the home of the first communist strikes in the United States also, they had a new program. And that program said this: we wanted to take white former soldiers to teach black poor children because white men from the Army would discipline black bodies. I told them I would not accept the position. I would not sign that document. And they said, but we need you. And I said, the black community needs me more. But when you go into a class every day with a new group of children, and you say to the children, hello, children, my name is Mr. Apple, it will take them 5 days to stop making jokes. So I will occasionally make jokes. Do not misinterpret that. It is a pedagogic style that most teachers have who work with young children. But this is deadly. So right now, we are facing things in my own nation where we have not jailed Bolsonaro. We have a czar. And the attacks on teachers and the racializing and patriarchal forms that go with it, the defunding of schools that go with it, are murderous. They're destroying communities, and the effect on teachers' lives and communities is horrible. So you'll forgive me if at times I tell things that are deeply uncomfortable, but I'm going to divide my talk into two pieces. One is to lay out something that those of you who have been taking the class with me have heard before. That is, what is going on in the world, in Germany, now in Denmark, in Norway, where I'm a distinguished professor there as well, in Chile, in what used to be one of my favorite places, Argentina. This is not just here. First, I want to congratulate you on the jailing of Bolsonaro. I have asked Delta Airlines to have a special seat for our new czar. I will not give his name except one time, Donald Trump. I have asked this university to house him. I will give you the key. I hope that you lose the key to the room and he can never get out. All right. That is the most serious part of my lecture. I also want to thank Professor Magna Suarez, whose career, in English we would say, sometimes you have people who allow you to stand on their shoulders. The fact that I am here is also out of respect for the work that she and this university is well known for. And it's a Center for Transdisciplinary Commitments also embody these kinds of things. And this is especially important if we're to answer the question that is the foundation of my and our collective work. We spend time on education. Will it make a difference that is lasting in that thing that we call society? So my analysis will draw from political economy, from critical cultural analyses, from social theory, from sociology of knowledge and epistemology, social movements, narratives of real teachers in real schools, and critical educational policies and practices. That's me. I am not someone who likes a label. There's not one thing that has formed me. And as someone who grew up very, very poor, as the only two, my brother and myself, the only white students in an all-black community in school, as someone who was the first generation finishing secondary school, I take these traditions very seriously because my family was denied them. And for many people in this audience, you understand how important it is to see the world through the eyes of people who are not you. And that's part of my task as well. So the first of two lectures now will begin, and they are closely related lectures. One will be to sort of lay out in a more popular way what is going on in schools throughout the world and what the struggles look like. And then the second part of the lecture will be, what are our responsibilities? I'm tired of people at universities who are rhetorical. That is, as an educator, I want us to take our theories seriously. That is why transdisciplinary studies that incorporate so much are so important, because there's no place to go where you are not being taught by different discourses and different people and different commitments. And my commitment in many ways will be, what are our responsibilities as people in education? What I call critical scholar activists. So that will be the second part. The next argument next week will be, do the efforts of building critical democratic and counter-hegemonic educational policies and practices, will they succeed? So I'm going to switch and remind myself that I'm also a storyteller. And I'm going to tell the stories of 3 or 4 national and local movements that are answering these questions practically. And I'm going to be honest about what their gains are, and also be honest about what mistakes can sometimes be made. And as someone named Michael Apple, who never made a mistake in one's life, that was a joke. I think we want to take that seriously, okay? I am going to talk until midnight, but I have ordered pizza for everyone. But coming from the north, you will pay for it. That will be the last joke, I think. So here is the question. Can education change society? Here's my reflections on the question. We need to think more powerfully about what education's role is in society, about whether it can participate in changing society's inequalities. We do that all the time. And I want to be honest, even though I have spent a good deal of time in Brazil, my first time here was in 1985, the last year of the military dictatorship in Orgas, in Porto Alegre, where my office was the office of the colonel, the military censor for the university. And he had to approve all of my lectures on the way out, since he had to leave before I did. Thank goodness. But because I am here also to learn, not simply to teach, I'm not going to talk too much about Brazil. I'll give some examples. But I am tired of the US saying, we know you don't. I want us to turn the map over. The South is the United States. Brazil has been the center of counter-hegemonic struggles, of anti-racist struggles, of struggles against patriarchal forms for almost all of its history. And the label of colonial doesn't quite capture the anti-colonial movements that formed the agendas of many, many people in this room as well. So I would hope that during the conversations afterwards, if I make a mistake, or if you have something to teach me, please do. You'll be arrested afterwards, but no. That was horrible. So first, obviously, I want to say that education is political, deeply political. And in order to understand that, we need two forms of epistemological understanding. One is what I want to call relational analysis, which says this: nothing can be understood by itself. So if we want to understand schools or curriculum or teaching or a discipline like chemistry, any discipline, we have to ask, in public institutions called universities, in schools, what is their relationship with other institutions and relations? And since society is made up of three kinds of inequalities: redistribution, recognition, meaning are you seen, as we did with enslaved people, as not fully human, or as women saying, as long as you're involved in care, as if caring was not a knowledge form and epistemological understanding, as long as you do that, that's fine. Just support your husband. And the third being representation, whose voices are heard as we think about these things. So basically, it is asking us to say, what is the relationship between what we do and the rest of society? And I'll talk a bit about that. The second is to say, Michael, you have these glasses on. What gives you the right to do this? Since for many people, they don't see the world through your glasses. So that is what is called epistemologically repositioning, and it says this: whether I like it or not, I grew up poor, I'm first generation finishing secondary school, I worked as a printer for many years, I somehow survived the US Army as a dissident, and I'm a former teachers union president, and I was arrested in a number of countries for giving this lecture. That is not a joke. Okay? Given that, Michael, change the glasses that you are wearing. I'm a white, now middle class, formerly very poor teacher, and I'm male, and I happen to be straight. What does that mean for how I understand society? It means I must be taught by the people who don't wear these, but wear others. Is that clear? Now, that is an epistemological demand as well as a social demand. Okay. That's the beginning and the end of the lecture. You can go now. So there's key questions behind this. So as many of you know, and thank you again for the people who were nice enough to introduce my work, for all of my career, and certainly when I was teaching in the slums of New Jersey, I've been guided by a set of critical questions. Rather than simply asking whether students have mastered a particular subject matter and have done well on our all-too-common tests, we should ask a different set of questions. Whose knowledge is this? How did it become official? What's the relationship between this knowledge and how it is organized and taught, and who has cultural, social, and economic capital in this society? Who benefits from these definitions of legitimate knowledge? Who does not? And what can we do as critical educators and activists to change existing educational and social inequalities and create curricula and teaching that are more socially just? And to deal with these issues as a practice, not simply as a theoretical agenda, we need to ask this question: can we change society? And in saying that, we have to understand schools are key parts of society. They are not afterthoughts. I'll come back to that in a second. The dominant groups have already answered this. Why has the right spent so much time during Bolsonaro here, and in the United States, in Germany right now, in England, in Chile, in Argentina, in Denmark now, in Norway, in Sweden, saying that schools are key places to be taken over by rightist ideological forms? They have already answered Gramsci's question. Those of you who know my work know I've been influenced by Antonio Gramsci, who argues very strongly that this is not a war of maneuver, but a war of position. And what he means by that is the following. A war of maneuver is like World War I. I have a gun, you have a gun. If I'm lying on the floor dripping blood, you won. But it's like a frontal assault. You'll forgive the masculinist imagery here, please. And Gramsci said, no, this is a war of position. Everything counts. Domestic labor, walking to school through dangerous areas, eating certain foods and the control of a diet, curriculum, teaching, parenting, all of that counts. Those are all sites in which we reproduce the thing we call society. Struggling in all of them is crucial. The task is to make the connections among those things. All right? Okay. So, hello. Okay, what do I do here?
Just close it. Here. It's finished. It's end. Okay.
Blessings on you.
Oh.
I was about to make a joke about this. With a last name like Apple, not being able to answer just a simple thing like which button to push to get that off the screen is very embarrassing. Okay. And since I do own the computer company, it's even more embarrassing. I don't. Okay, so let me go back. Okay. So, dominant groups have already answered this question powerfully. But what are dominant groups? There is a new hegemonic bloc that is organizing every facet of our life that it can. And I want us to think about this like an umbrella. And here, Lucila has pointed to my work on this in educating the right way and in official knowledge. But I want to argue that it is not only neoliberals who are in charge here. It is a new hegemonic bloc, a new group of people who have told society it's raining. It's raining in schools, it's raining in the economy, it's raining in universities. You want to come out of the rain, follow me. Okay? And there are 4 groups in this, and they are not all the same. There are disagreements there, different social policies, but they, unlike the left, have realized that compromises within their politics are crucial. As my grandfather, a political activist, once reminded me, saying, Michael, never forget that when the left lines up in a firing squad, it always lines up in a circle. We do not need the right to kill us. We're perfectly good at killing ourselves. The right understands that, and it has formed a very cogent alliance where they're able to deal with their disagreements. So there are 4 groups in what I call conservative modernization. It looks forward to a capitalist economy that's more efficient, where society is made up of makers and takers. And we want to support makers, not takers. And poor people in favelas, women, and others are takers. They're not makers. Oh boy. So, this group looks forward. Neoliberals believe one simple thing, that is, private is good, public is bad. Right? We'll come back to that in a few minutes. These people are behind what Stephen Ball calls performativity, managerialism. If it moves in classrooms, measure it. And if it hasn't moved yet, measure it anyway in case it moves tomorrow. And a good teacher should be paid more if the children score higher on the tests. That's what goes on in the United States. And that was not under the right, by the way. That was Barack Obama who put that in place. You can imagine what teachers' lives are like when everything is to be dependent on a test. They did not help build that test at all. Okay? The second group is what we call neoconservatism. They want a standard curriculum. Everyone learns the same, but they want to control it. They would like national curriculum, and they want a loss of collective memory. So as one example, as curriculum becomes more and more a site of profit in many nations, where teachers have lost their autonomy and respect and control over the curriculum, they now purchase the curriculum, and in one of the most profitable textbooks in the South of the United States, students, including African American and Afro-Caribbean students, learn one simple thing. Slavery was good because it taught enslaved people work skills. That is part of official knowledge now. I think they should be jailed. Okay? All right. So we have this odd thing of decentralization, neoliberalism saying possessive individualism is crucial, and neoconservatism that wants strong state control over the curriculum in a compromise. The third group, which is the fastest growing group in the United States and in Brazil, it is what I call authoritarian populist religious forms. This is religion for theocracy, or if you will, religion for prosperity. And what used to be a dominant Catholic nation is now almost half evangelical. And in the United States, as we'll see, the fastest growing school reform is now the gated community of homeschooling, where children are taken out of public schools because the parents do not want their children to be near the body and culture of the other. So we'll begin to see that race enters in powerful ways, hierarchical things, and taking curriculum out of schools that might make children who are white and dominant feel uncomfortable. All right? Finally, there is what I want to call new managerialism. These people would never vote for Trump and never vote for Bolsonaro, but they believe that their critical skills are essential to education. They are measurement experts, testing experts, people who say, we know what good teaching is, we will teach you. There are no narratives coming from below. It is, we are the new managers that will tell you what to do. That is the fastest growing movement within the state apparatus, and it is essential for neoliberals and neoconservatives to have that. Okay? All right. By the way, I have another 100 pages, so you have to be patient. So let me now turn to real schools. So I said that these dominant groups now, this what I call conservative modernization, have answered the question. They are in charge in many, many nations right now. So let me give some examples of the questions being answered about can education change society that they are giving us. They're answering it constantly. For them, education is the prime element in changing society. Education is for future workers. It is for the ideological components of dominant, etc. So, under neoliberalism, vouchers and privatization become the ideological form that transform education from a public good to a private good. So right now, we desocialize the meaning of democracy. Now, democracy is what we call a sliding signifier. It has no essential meaning whatsoever. It has a history of conflict. Let us pretend this agua mineral, I fell into Spanish. This mineral water, this bottle, is democracy. Neoliberals will keep the bottle, so linguistic politics are very important. Most of us want democracy, and pour out the water and pour in a new definition of democracy. Democracy is no longer a social concept. It is about individual choice on a market. So as a parent, if I make the right choice for my children, that is democratic. It desocializes it. It loses the historic memory of the struggles for more social understandings of markets, of the role of schools in providing the sociality that is necessary, of telling the truth about the various things that make up the common. The word common is not a noun ever. It is a verb. It speaks to a process by which our voices in concert are allied or in struggle. So democracy is now choice. And this is leading increasingly in many nations to the censorship of books, the growth of a group that is one of my least favorite, a group called Moms for Liberty. And these will be found here in the same things. I will not try and say it in Portuguese, but schools without parties and the movements behind that. So it's very similar in many, many nations right now. And the fear, if you will, of race and gender and class. So we must engage in one task, historical amnesia. We must, if you will, take away from official knowledge because we do not want the collective memories to be continued. And that is going on so that this week in the state of Tennessee, 2 teacher educators at the university were fired from their jobs because one student said, "You said that some people could be binary." That is, some people could be trans. Or there was, biologically, it is possible to have intersex people. And the young woman who was near graduation walked out of class and immediately went to the chancellor's office and said, "I want this teacher to stop teaching this course because the Bible says that there's only men and women. The teacher has been temporarily suspended and is not teaching for the next year so that she can be educated. So this is not a joke now. We're beginning to see the state being transformed into this. Am I clear about that? Okay. So this is becoming threatening for teachers, with laws being passed to forbid teaching and curriculum. It also has transformed teacher training in powerful ways. So you'll see it says, Teach for America here. Most times in most nations, teachers must be licensed and take courses to become teachers. In the United States and in England and in many other nations right now, teachers are no longer put in teacher education programs. Teacher education programs are being closed, literally closed and defunded, because the assumption is, and I quote now from our former governor of my state, which was the home of U.S. socialism, by the way, and he said, anyone can teach. So we almost passed a law in my legislature that said this: anyone with a secondary school diploma can teach elementary school. Anyone. It lost by 1 vote. But we now have things called Teach for America, Teach for China, Teach for Argentina, Teach for Chile, Teach for Mexico, okay? Teach for Korea, where people who did their undergraduate work at places as fine as this were hired as teachers with never, ever having had a course in teaching science, teaching literacy. Now, because they don't know how to build curricula, the curricula becomes again a source of profit. So increasingly, the curricula is not necessarily ideological in the usual sense of that. The form of it, it is there as part of an economic form. And the fastest profit-making in publishing is publishing for those curricula. So increasingly, publishers are doing the same thing. They're also taking over school boards. That is, the elected boards that tell us who and what can be a teacher, in denying funds for legislators, and as I mentioned, to creating gated communities around their children through homeschooling. Right now, there are close to 6 to 7 million children in the United States who are not in school, they are homeschooled. The vast majority are conservative evangelicals, and they believe one simple thing: God spoke to me, he didn't speak to you. Okay? Now, do not misinterpret me. When I was first here in 1985, I worked with Jesuits for Social Justice in Porto Alegre. My dear friend, who is no longer with us, Paulo Freire, reminded me in Brazil how important religious forms are for liberation. And I continue to work with religious people who believe that people are made in God's image. And God was very, very clear in the embodiment through Jesus Cristo of how you should treat other people. You should treat them as yourselves. And you cannot understand participatory budgeting or the citizen school and its history in Para State or here unless you understand the religious impulses of many people behind it. But this is not just pro-religious, this is anti-religious in many ways. Okay? So it creates historical amnesia, and none of this is new. I must tell a personal story here. In my last year of teaching in elementary school, I was teaching in a rural community that forbade people of color to live there. In the deeds to the land, if you wanted to sell your land, the deeds said, you may not sell this to the N-word. I will not say it. In Inglés, well, it is another word for Negro, but it is a despicable word. So you'll forgive me, but my mouth will die if I say it in public. You may not sell it to a person who is of African descent. You may not say it to Italians. You may not say it to people who are Jewish. You may not sell it to anyone who is Muslim. You may not sell the land to those. The curriculum for my state said, in the 6th grade where I was teaching, you must study your local community. So as a good person, I went with the children to the historical archives, and there we found the daily newspapers, etc., that showed that there had been lynchings of black people in that community. Let me repeat that. In this community, a poor rural community, very poor, there had been lynchings, and there were pictures with postcards of white people watching black people be hung from trees. It was fun. I have no words to describe this. The children and I spoke before I knew Paulo Freire or before I was deeply involved in liberatory forms. And we said, we must do a newspaper. So we made a community newspaper, and the religious folks in the community demanded that all the 6th grade teachers be fired. We were suspended for 1 month. We got lawyers, and we won. I want to tell that story because what we are facing has never been new. It continues. And one of the reasons I accepted the invitation to come here is because this nation, again, has one of the most vibrant histories of understanding this. And even in the face of the 49% of the people who somehow were convinced to vote in many ways towards a military dictatorship, unlike the United States, you succeeded. Okay. So, have I gotten everybody angry enough, either at me or, okay. I have a pacemaker, I have a heart condition. So I have to be careful if you see that I'm trying to be calm, because otherwise I will fall down. And Lucila, who we already know that we've already talked about our bodily illnesses, and she knows what to do when I fall, okay? Which is to say, he fell because I wished he'd stop talking. And, okay. All right. So what can we learn from dominant groups about these examples? First, as I mentioned, it's a war of maneuver, not a war of maneuver, a war of position. Everything is important. So anyone who says to you, it makes no difference what the curriculum is. As long as the children are happy in your classroom, everything is fine. That's wrong. That the struggles over consciousness and common sense are crucial. Stuff that is popular knowledge from below, must be included as part of it. Education is a crucial site of struggle, and that means that it is crucial that we take seriously the curriculum, teaching, and policy. Those are not afterthoughts. They are not also. And one of the things we must fight against is the essentialist, reductionist theories that say it's all about the economy all the time. We cannot change the economy unless we also change consciousness. And one of the sites where that consciousness is taught is the place that we care so much about. And if we are to be respectful of teachers and communities, we have to take that seriously. Well, what does this mean? First, we have to stop using the word society. This question is a bad question. Society is a place marker. It's a temporary word. It's an empty word like democracy. We have to combine it with more complex and specific understandings. Whoops. Because using that ignores the important gains in our political understanding that have been made over the past 4 decades. Why would Afro-Brazilians spend so much time fighting about the way their children are treated, the way the economy works so that their children don't have the mobilizations that go on, that their mobility is truncated. We either have to say that oppressed people have false consciousness, or they understand dramatically how important the lives of their children are. We also have to understand that not only the economy, but political and cultural spheres are absolutely central. The struggle over common sense. That there's multiple relations of power. Class, gender, race, and ability are examples. In fact, as I've argued in a book that preceded the most recent one, Can Education Change Society? The disability rights community offers one of the most potent examples of interrupting capitalism that there is. If I am born with no arms, and I am hired as a secretary, and you put a computer in front of me that requires that I use my hands, a disability rights activist would say, "What are you doing? I need one that is voice activated." It says, "You cannot treat me just as a source of profit. I am not your profit machine. I am important. I deserve respect, and no society that is based on the disrespect of people's bodies will I approve of." So again, we have to ask, how can we be taught? How can Michael, who always assumed class, gender, and race, be taught about the importance of the body, of the way in which, in quotes, disability activists work? So it also means then that words like society can lead to cynicism and a lack of action. After all, Michael was just a teacher. I can't change society. Society is so big. What can an individual do? That is paralyzing. And the task of critical education at universities and elsewhere is not to give us more paralysis and more cynicism. It is to restore the collective memories and actions of real people in real communities. I'll come back to that later. So it means that schools are key sites of society, not something outside it. So I want to throw out the question. It's not a good question anymore. So what do schools do? First, whoops, he did it again. First, they're integral parts of the economy. They're workplaces. They're sites of profit. People work there. If I remember correctly, there are people like teachers in schools. They don't get paid enough, but they're workers. As a former teacher syndicate president, that was very clear to me. And by the way, without a college degree, when I was hired as a teacher, I made $1,000 more without certification, without a license, without a college degree, than women with master's degrees. Patriarchal form controlled caring communities. And the struggle by women teachers is a key part of this history and the loss of collective memory of how long it took to equalize salaries. People cook for the children. People clean the buildings. People are psychologists who, when children are crying in class, are brought in to hug them, to listen to them. Schools are part of the economy. And in fact, in my own nation, in my own state, teachers are forbidden from giving children hugs because of fear of sexuality. Yet caring itself is a form of knowing. It is an epistemological struggle to restore the sense that part of rationality must have a sense of care and respect. Without it, it is simply irrational. But schools are also, and here I thank Patricia and Lucila for reminding me of this, there is certain knowledge that is official It is a result of struggle. It is not natural. But there are victories. When Moms for Liberty says, all those books written by black well-known authors must be taken out of the school library, all those books on gay life must go, all those books on the arts and the importance of art, that will not give us new jobs. They must go as well. Well, that struggle is over. Who are we, etc. There are also, damn it. There are also, I'm sorry. Thank you. So this is a bad excuse, but as some of you know, I do have arthritis, and right now my hands are numb. So I'll use any excuse possible. No, but right now my hands are numb, so I'm trying to, there are 3 buttons on this. I can feel 2 of them at the same time. So you'll forgive me, but I am someone who is labeled as disabled. So that is not an apology for my disability, but it's to explain why even when I'm trying to look at this and push the button, I can't feel it, okay? So if someone wants to come from the audience, I will give you no, I won't. Okay, all right. So, schools are identity creators. So Michael felt, for instance, that I was not smart enough to be a teacher. I was not smart enough to go to finish my degree. And I got admitted to Columbia's University program in philosophy, sociology, and education, program that no longer exists. Transdisciplinary form was not funded, right? And that program admitted me on probation. And when people in those classes who went to Harvard or Yale or Columbia, an elite university, when they came into the epistemology classes, they sat like this. Pierre Bourdieu was part of their bloodstream. I sat like this. And if the teacher had coughed, I would ask him to spell it. I don't mean that as a joke. My identity as someone worth it, worthy of being there, was transformed by teachers like many people here, in elementary school, in secondary school, in universities, in schools where I taught, saying, we will no longer tolerate the disrespect. These critical understandings are actually more important for us than anyone else. Schools create identities. And if you are an Afro-Brazilian, a black woman in a mathematics class in my country and in yours, the struggle over identity is something that is faced every minute of every day. And as the father of a black child, this is not an impersonal academic thing for Rima Apple and Michael Apple. We watched our son, who had won awards academically, who danced professionally in ballet, pushed out of secondary school, because after all, as a black young man who walked in a different way as a form of affiliation, and sometimes code switched into what we call black English, watched him be told, you don't deserve to be here. He's now an engineer at the University of Chicago. Let me remind you that schools also can make a difference in positive ways. You'll forgive the personal stories, but this is not impersonal. We have to remember the children we are dealing with in the schools that we work with. Okay. Then also, schools are sites of social movement creation. Right? People say, you can't do this to my child. You can't do it to our child. I don't own my child. My child is part of a community, and the community must be heard. Because of that, schools are sites of developing and learning tactics. Even when these critical forms fail, we know what not to do. And the stories must be told, and we need long-term research that says what succeeded, why did things fail. Finally, schools are sites of social experimentation. All of this becomes part of schools transforming society. So what does this mean for us? Now I want to get to the second half. Just like I can't feel the things. There we go. Okay. So what are the tasks of critical educators on this? First, it's a simple one. We have to tell the truth. No matter what, even though there will be risks, critical educators here or in schools or in teacher unions or community activists have to say, we will not tolerate this anymore. Right? We will not allow another generation of children to be lost. We will not allow people to make budget decisions about our schools unless our voices are heard. So those of you familiar with participatory budgeting know what this means. And by the way, as a sign of your success, right now the city of Chicago has officially said it will do its budget through participatory budgeting. Do you know where they learned that from? Here. Let me thank you again for your work. Second, we also have to, here we go again. We have to demonstrate spaces for action. So the reasons that neoliberalism and conservative modernization are often winning is because they occupy the spaces that are made empty by neoliberals. Let me give an example. Ideologically, neoliberalism mandates the creation of particular forms of individualism, choice on a market. Yet people seem to need sociality. So when I moved from a house to an apartment downtown, I said it has to be near a coffee shop because I'm going to meet my friends there. And sociality means I have to have a triple, every minute, triple espresso. Otherwise, I'll fall asleep. I don't mean that to be cute. We look for spaces. There is a human need to be social. Now, that sphere can be filled just like this bottle of water can be filled in multiple ways. It can be filled by evangelical churches, which is what's happening now. It can be filled by teacher unions. It can be filled by families. It can be filled by anti-racist mobilizations. It can be filled by teachers on the web, on Facebook, on all kinds of stuff, on TikTok, forming communities and saying, I tried this in my classroom, look at this. We can make counter-hegemonic communities, but we have to ask, where are the spaces where that can be filled? And too often we say, well, the right's there. It's already filled. But sometimes it's not filled. So part of our task is an analytic one. This is where social mobilization literature is absolutely central to this. Where are the spaces where the social that is progressive can be filled? By what groups? When we think about the chair that that this university was nice enough to have me come for, it is based on a theory of epistemological sociality. So the implications of this for university life are also absolutely central to what we're about. The next one, which I think is central, is is one of the most important, and that is acting as critical secretaries of critical democratic and effective education. The right is really good because it tells its stories all the time. When I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is open, I'm really guilty about this. I go and I read the New York Times. It's like TV Global. I read it and I say, it's an academic phrase, oh shit. And I'll learn more about what's not critical and what's not democratic, and here's another headline about how we lost. And then my heart monitor goes, hello, how are you? I just want you to know you're about to fall down, and then Lucilia's got to come up and help me. Okay? All kidding aside, those spaces are there. So we need to recolonize the space of the media in powerful ways and tell the stories of success, because all we hear are the stories of failure. That means that we must define what counts as research differently than many universities are doing in the United States, as an example. So right now, to get tenure in the United States, you have to show how much money you have brought in. That means that those people who are doing historical books that take 4 years, or doing longitudinal work about schools and what happens in schools, and are following up a group of children to see what happens in their lives, that is one publication every 2 or 3 years. And you don't get more money every year. So we must fill that space. That means that narrative and qualitative research is central, but it doesn't take the place of other kinds of empirical and historical work. This is not an epistemological war. We must find a way of blending these things together. As Habermas reminds us, there are multiple forms of rationality, and then he stereotypes the ones that have numbers. That's a disaster. Okay? We have to be very cautious about that. So we have to ask as critical secretaries. Let me give one personal example. A book that was me asking, I was invited to be the secretary that is to write a book on democratic schools in the United States. I turned it down. The group was partly progressive. And I said, the only way, it is not my voice you need to hear. If I can act as the secretaries of the teachers doing this, then we will do the book. And that means no censorship. It must be the voices and the reality of real teachers in favelas, in private schools, in prisons, real people. Teachers, communities, students. Okay? They agreed that book, Democratic Schools, has sold 1 million copies. I have refused to accept any royalties for any of my books because that money would be me using their lives. What, to buy a new Mercedes? I love a new Mercedes. So if you want to give it to me, I'm sure that I can turn it into a taxi and we can sit and wait for the light to turn for 2 hours. I'm sorry, I've learned about the traffic in Belo Horizonte. But the real point in this doggerel is I cannot ask people to sacrifice their time, their resources, to tell the stories of success unless I contribute to it. Okay? So let me go on. So, acting as critical secretaries now, again, and what that means for the university as well as for non-university stuff. And again, that is absolute. So that means what counts as official knowledge and how we evaluate it, what counts as official research, and the political economy at universities, must be thought about, okay, to say the least. I'll try and offend everyone at least once. If I haven't, would you let me know? It costs a little more, but that's okay. But we have to, at the same time, not be anti-intellectual about this. We have to keep traditions alive critically. So the traditions I am drawing upon, from narratives to epistemological forms to social mobilizations and social movements, all of those are crucial. And too often, the literature and critical pedagogy is anti-intellectual. The only work that's done is on a keyboard. Keyboard work is really important. And as someone who has written a lot of books, right, obviously I believe that writing is crucial. However, unless I am in contact with the reality at the same time, what am I supposed to write about? And we'll come back to that in a minute. That means I have to keep traditions that can criticize my tradition alive. And then I have to give one's knowledge social movements. So, okay, let me give a little personal story about that. Okay. I have to tell a story about my father. Is that okay? Thank you. Okay, all right. So, when a book that you were nice enough to report on, when Educating the Right Way, which is translated in Brazil, was first published, it won the National Book Award in Education. I was very proud. And my father, who was a printer, working class, first generation, but sacrificed his life for his children, as many, many people do. My first task was, as soon as the first copy came to me, is to sign it and say, Dad, you wrote this too. I would not be able to do this if you had not been a political activist. You taught me the foundations. And he was beginning to have dementia. And he's living in a place that we call a retirement home for special needs. Okay. And he's in one room that has a bathroom attached to it, and a bed and a little kitchenette. And you can hardly get in because you walk in, there's a little hallway to get inside the room, is a bookcase filled with Michael Apple and Rima Apple. Because my wife Rima had an endowed professorship in history of women's lives and medicine. And I said, Dad, here, please. And for some reason I was feeling, well, here I am proud again of a book that won a National Book Award, how good I am. And I'm telling my father that I love him and it's really his book too. But did I forget what it's like to be a teacher in a classroom? Even though a lot of my work is in classrooms. And I said to him, I'm not certain this is important. Is it important because it won a National Book Award? Is it important if it enables people to open a door to doing more critical work and see that that is legitimate? So I'm not certain that what I'm doing is good enough. And Harry Apple looks at Michael Apple, comes right up to my face. You'll forgive this now, and says, Michael, what the fuck did you just say? That gets your attention. And this spit coming out onto my face. And he looks at me and says, that is the most fucking disrespectful thing you have ever said to your family. Did you forget how much we sacrificed? You are us that we wanted to be. You must give that back to us. because we labored so that you would know it. And it is your responsibility to bring it to the community, to give it to oppressed people in a way that changes their lives too. It is a tool, and his words are, to set us free. That's my father, Colin. Michael, I never swore. Why are you saying that? I'm a nice man. Now that means that this first one is important. In order to take my father's words seriously, I have to remember how to speak and write in different levels. If this is to help change the world, it must be accompanied not only by the crucial academic work that people in this room are doing that is so important, but one of the reasons the right wins is they are able to talk real words in ways that are saying, yes, it's raining, come under my umbrella. And too often in critical education, we will quote someone I do love and respect, Paulo Freire, forgetting how much work he put in real favelas, in the secretarial work in São Paulo, etc. And it's one of the reasons that I was asked to write the introduction in English to one of his books, because it informed me and my students about what is possible. Okay? That means, as well, that we not stand on the balcony. I'm about to jump off. But too often, even Pierre Bourdieu, someone I was in debate with, who taught me a lot, and deigned to speak in English for me, thank you, Pierre. But I disagreed with him profoundly about certain kinds of things. But even he, in his book on resistance, reminded us, do not stand on the balcony. And by that what I mean is, we will tell you what you need to know. Oh, but professor, that doesn't fit my life. That's not about what we're doing in this school. Or we're doing that, and we're doing it better than what you said. So, we have to learn that discourses have their own politics. And those politics can't always be Michael quoting Habermas, even though his courses were very important in my life. So anyone who knows me knows I also did a degree in epistemology. Okay? It's one of the reasons that I'm still waiting for Patricia to correct me about some of the mistakes I'm going to make. You'll forgive the joke, because it is with great respect for a discipline that is too often marginalized. Yet these are the central questions that are about my politics. They are about whose knowledge and what do we even count as knowledge and why. It also means building and joining social movements. Not only not being on the balcony, observing it, but also joining with it. Now, there are great risks in that, and I want to be very honest about that. It is easy for Michael Apple, invited here, to stand here and say, join movements. That's nice. In a nation that almost had a military dictatorship again, where if I am a single mother subjected to sexual violence, where I am the sole protector of my family economically and my children, it's nice of Michael for you to sloganize and say, join a movement. I have to be able to understand reality that people are experiencing. But like I did about the royalties, let me be honest, I was scared out of my mind when the secret police in Seoul came up to the stage and dragged me off of it for giving a lecture similar to this while the military dictatorship was in power. But the evangelical Christians, who are also democratic educators, who invited me to give my lecture, who were students at that university in Seoul, were arrested with me. And as they said, quoting Jesus Cristo, we must do this because God wills it. I do not believe in the same characteristic of a God, but to them, they are doing work that will transform society. And I must respect that as well. But these movements are multiple, and we have to do them well. I'm almost done, I promise. But many of us are teachers. And that means we have to act as mentors and models for our students. So when I don't say these things lightly, I'm also, when I am arrested, I'm not doing it just to say, look at me. As I mentioned, how can I ask my students who are teachers now, or future teachers, or community activists, to do this if I am not modeling it for them, if I am not taking those risks? Okay? And then finally, there are spaces that we all work in for those, and there are those who are not there. In teacher education, for instance, Wisconsin has 200,000 indigenous people living there. There's only 2 future teachers in our undergraduate teacher education classes who are indigenous. Like here, we are now have a 2-year program in indigenicity, and we have a new chair in indigenous studies, just like here. Okay? This is absolutely crucial. But where are the students? Okay? There's a racial contract as well. Wisconsin is the 3rd most segregated state in the United States. Only 7% of our students are black. Half of them say the place is cold, and they're not talking about the weather, which is cold right now. We had 1 foot of snow yesterday. They're talking about the way it feels to be a minoritized and oppressed person in a largely white institution. So, how do we expand the spaces? Financially, in our actions, so that we are constantly doing this to try and build the society that we wish to have outside as well as inside. Okay. The last couple of things, and then we're done. So, what does this mean? First, non-acting is acting. That seems simple to say, but saying I'm too busy is an action. Saying that I've got all the work I have to do, that's an action. And I know what I'm saying. The average work week of a teacher in my own nation is now between 58 and 70 hours a week. Okay, but we still have to act. There's this vision of non-reformist reforms. The word reform in the U.S. means something that changes, that's sort of good. We have to engage in things that open the next door, not simply change one thing. Does changing that one thing open the next door? We have to talk back in the media. Okay? So if something's written, something that's racist, we have to talk back to it immediately. And we have to ask certain questions. When Michael says we, who's the we? What are the alliances we have built? Epistemological, social, etc. Who is the we? Who are our allies? And then, what are the lessons to be learned that I can... Oh. I'm sorry. Now I'll start over again. And that wasn't, I was serious. No. So who is the we? Who are the allies? What are the lessons to be learned from you? So as I mentioned, I am here not only to teach, but if I were to say in 1985, what changed the way I think about education and what's possible in the places I grew up, in slums, in real schools, you have been my teacher, and part of my task is to convey that. And we need broad alliances, otherwise we will lose. Some final thoughts quickly. With all of this, we must never be romantic. None of this is easy. We may fail, but hope is a powerful resource. And hope comes alive when we understand our history. This university embodies many of these things. It still has work to do. Belo Horizonte is a city with many, many contradictions. But it is increasingly being taught by groups of oppressed people that you can't continue to be oppressed. So we have to think of ourselves as optimists with no illusions whatsoever. We have faced this before. You have faced Bolsonaro. Would you like to come to the United States now and do the same damn thing for me? Please. So in that, my honest statement, think of the gains that have been made over the years. Think as I have to of my father's sacrifices, what they were required, of all the sacrifices that are still going on so that we can be here. So a final statement. Let me just read this. This is my Bible. In multiple nations throughout the world, we owe it to the children. We owe it to the teachers and community activists who came before us, to the workers who are exploited, to those who have died and been imprisoned in the long and continuing struggle for justice and true democracy in many nations of the world. We owe it to all of them and to so many more people to continue the struggle for an education that is critically democratic. The struggle continues. Thank you.